again, I was attempting to try to bring in, as wide a variety of technologies as we can, and as all of you know, and if you've been watching trends, the growth of e-bikes, certainly in Asia and in Europe, is skyrocketing and beginning to take off here. So I thought it would be really important to bring that perspective to our conference, and since we have one of the more successful e-bikes in the U.S. based right here in Colorado, I thought it would be appropriate to have Jim come here. As I said, he's the founder and president of OptiBike in Boulder, Colorado. Also trained as an engineer, also a motocross expert, I believe, and has been involved with two-wheel transportation for quite some time. So, Jim Turner.
Thanks. So Bill really got me remembering why I started building electric bikes about 16 years ago, because of all these oil and energy issues and other things people have talked about here. And everybody's alluded a bit to bicycles and electric bikes, which really are an amazing vehicle from the standpoint of energy use. I said I've been doing this for 16 years, and this year I wrote this book on electric bikes. And I did it because I saw a lot of people didn't understand the basics of electric bikes. So it's kind of an introductory and a primer. And you can download it free to various places if you go to the website there. So electric bikes are a worldwide phenomenon. They're everywhere in the world. From Bangkok to Beijing, San Francisco. They really are a worldwide phenomenon. And a few years ago, the California Academy of Sciences called electric bikes the future of transportation. This bike was actually on display there, and when they reopened the Academy, and it was the most viewed display they had in the history, this whole thing on the future of transportation. And we'll see how that fits into the mix. So electric bikes are the world's largest selling electric vehicle. There's over 30 million units sold last year. And to get that in a bit of comparison, you have about 60 million cars sold a year in the world and 130 million regular bicycles. So electric bikes are a large part of the transportation mix already. So it's a $6 billion industry. It's not real big as far as transportation goes, because electric bikes are very low intensive in everything. And it's a growing market, especially growing. Sales are projected to be 47 million units in just 6 years. So that's an increase of 17 million units in just 6 years. Very big growth. Electric bikes, unlike what we've heard, a lot of the other systems here today are bought by individuals, so the penetration can be very quickly. We don't need a government to approve them. One thing you'll notice in this pie chart is that most of the sales are in China. China accounts for right now about 20 million electric bike sales a year, and the rest of the world is a small little fraction. And you can see it's not expected to change. There's a number of reasons for that, because China has always been a bicycle-centric country, so the introduction of electric bikes makes perfect sense to them. So to understand electric bicycles, you need to know what one is. I had a question for everyone. How many spent more than $20 on fuel for their vehicle last year? Okay. And this is what's so amazing about electric bike. For $20, you can drive 10,000 miles. So you think about it. It's equivalent to 2,000 miles per gallon. I mean, it's so phenomenal what you can do with electric bike. And we'll see more about how they do this. So an electric bicycle is essentially a bicycle, and you add a motor and a battery. It could be a hydrogen fuel cell. That doesn't really matter. But one of the key things about an electric bike is it has pedals that work. That differentiates it from a motorcycle or a moped throughout the whole world. All the governments have got together and said, electric bikes, we want to promote them that work in the bicycle infrastructure. So they must have pedals. And each country limits electric bikes in power and speed differently. but they want them to use the bicycle infrastructure because there is a large bicycle infrastructure. So whether it be riding on bike paths, parking in front of the store, riding on a sidewalk, an electric bicycle has a significant advantage over a motorcycle. The other side of it is the health aspect of it, which we'll see later. So what is the key to an electric bike? So most of us, with a regular bicycle, and we compare it to a car, we find there's some drawbacks. It's typically slower, unless you're in tightly congested areas. And if there's hills, you get sweaty, so it's not that convenient to jump on and go somewhere. So you're taking more time to do this, and if there's hills or headwinds, you don't want to ride your regular bicycle. The electric bike comes in here, and it breaks those barriers. What we find is most things, the electric bike is typically as fast as a car, unless you're driving down the highway, and you can climb hills and control your heart rate so you don't get into a big sweat. So you can go to work dressed like I am on 5 or 10 mile ride. A lot of people have talked about electric bikes as the last mile. I believe they're the full 10 mile. We have customers commuting 20 miles a day. We had a bike come in the other day, it had like 20,000 miles on it. They're really transportation pieces. That extra power and average speed changes what you can do with a bicycle and makes it a viable alternative to the car, and at 2,000 miles per gallon. So why is the huge growth? Not maybe seem obvious, but there's some other factors. So one is the world population is expanding. Everybody here, it's nothing new to anyone here, and causing an impact on all the resources in the world, from fuel to resources to build things. Another thing is the world's middle class is expanding rapidly. The increase in middle class, I think in the next few years will be more than the entire population of the US. And they want mobility. And the other thing they want is personal mobility. We've talked about J-Pods in the idea of personal mobility. And that's what an electric bike offers people, is personal mobility. So the electric bike also is an answer for so many reasons. So it has multiple benefits. If we look at health, environment, energy, money saved, traffic congestion, or parking, it's all a win-win situation. So let's look at each of those individually. So on health, what you're doing is, when we sit in the car, we're doing a passive activity. All forms of transportation are passive except an electric bicycle. The electric bicycle lets you get low-intensity exercise in time you're already using. So it essentially becomes a time-saving device. You then have weight loss, you lower your blood pressure. You know, we've seen people eliminate all prescription drug medication. So Steve here, he drove 3,300 miles in a year and lost 40 pounds. So that's a lot of miles that he replaced of a car. And so we did the calculation, that cost him $6 for energy for 3,300 miles. It takes my truck to get to work once. So the other thing is the environment. There's about 1% of materials to build an electric bike versus a car, because it's just the sheer mass of it. The infrastructure for an electric bike is very light. You don't have to have the intensity that you have for building a highway for cars. And there's a large reduction, and you can say 100% reduction in carbon emissions, because it's actually a viable solar alternative. So we talked about every 1,000 miles eliminates about 50 gallons of gas used. These are really viable solar options. You can use a 150-watt panel, which is now less than $150, and charge your electric bike. When the floods hit, I live a bit out in the country north of Boulder, and when the floods hit, and you realize when there's maybe no gas because there's no electricity anymore, an electric bicycle, you can start actually having transportation. FEMA is actually looking at buying these with trailers, because in the areas that are affected, there is not energy often, and they want to have a mobile energy source. Electric bikes can easily carry 200 and 300 pound loads, which you can't easily do as a human. In the dollar saved, as I mentioned earlier, you have $4 of electricity, 2,000 miles, $400 in a car to do that. Much lower maintenance. And then as a nation, we look at reduced healthcare costs because we're getting healthier as a population. And that's one of the bigger threats to us. So traffic congestion, obviously you can put a lot more bikes in the same space, and it's a lighter infrastructure, and there's no tailpipe pollution, so you've eliminated pollution. Parking, similar situation. You know, you can park on sidewalks as they do now. You can park in less intensive areas. You're closer to where you want to get to, so they have all those advantages again. Higher density versus a car. We all know cars are bad. You ever will drive them, right? So. But for all these great things, the U.S. sales suck. They're like 140,000 units maybe last year. That's optimistic. How is that if they're selling 28 million? And why is the U.S. so bad? So the U.S. is different than China, different than Europe. We don't have a bike commuting society. We use bikes for recreation, but not for a primary form of transportation. There's a lack of electric bike dealers. There's always been none. And electric bike service centers, that doesn't exist either. And then the bicycling infrastructure isn't as good as we've heard in other countries. So that all contributes to less electric bike penetration here. But times are changing. The U.S. e-bike sales actually doubled last year, and traditional bike dealers are adopting e-bikes, and bike mechanics are learning electric bike technology. There's electric bike associations. There's technology courses being taught in some junior colleges now on how to work on e-bikes. And cities are continuing to increase bicycling infrastructure, which e-bikes can use. So what I think, ultimately, electric bike is a time-saving device. So we looked, I think Bill was talking about what's the motivation to adopt something. If I can save time, then I'm better off. Because I have a 10-mile commute, and it's about 15 minutes by car, it's 20 minutes by bike. So I'm doing 40 minutes worth of exercise a day. If I do that 3 days a week, that's 2 hours of exercise. I didn't have to go do anything with, I didn't have to get dressed for, I didn't have to pay for, I actually get money back because it's cheaper than driving the car. So ultimately that's a motivation for everyone to do it, because we're all pressed. I think when I look at the country as a whole, and healthcare costs are actually up there with energy as a threat to the entire society. How are we going to pay for healthcare? And most people struggle with the time to do it. How do you incorporate it in your life? As you get busy, it's harder and harder to do. The bicycle lets you do that, and that's what differentiates it. If you're looking at a motorcycle, that gets you there potentially faster, but you're not getting this exercise component. And you don't have the ability to use the bicycle infrastructure. So just quick summary. As you know, the use is growing worldwide. It's growing like about 7.5% per annum. 17 more million units in a few years. It has a lot of positive aspects, from health to the environment. There's really probably some detriments to electric bikes, but I haven't really heard them. And e-bike use in the U.S. is ready to soar. But I have to preface that when I started in this 16 years ago, I was ready to soar too. So I've been ahead of the curve for a while. So we expect to see that. It took off in Europe. Sales grew 30% the last 2 years in Europe. So they are starting to see a large penetration. It took a while even in Europe with their bicycle culture for e-bikes to take off. So that's my presentation. Happy to answer some questions.
Where I live in the city of Mountain View, there are bike lanes almost everywhere. And in fact, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they set up, I saw these lockers or box places that were being set up, and they have these e-bikes that anyone can use in the city, $9 for 3 hours or $22 for a day. Yet where I teach in Fremont was this huge planned suburbia that was based on 25 cents a mile gas back in the 60s when it was developed. And they have these huge boulevards, and you wouldn't catch me dead riding my bike from Mountain View to Fremont, because those last 3 miles I have to compete with cars, and that's a big issue. Again, you've got rights of way issues that you have to deal with. You have another issue. How much does that bike cost right there?
Well, our bikes are expensive. They're from $5,000 to $15,000. You can buy e-bikes for $1,000, and the majority of those 140,000 sold are about $1,200. But the payback, what's amazing is even with a $12,000 bike, the payback with moderate use at 3,000 miles a year is like 3 years. If you look at all the depreciation.
I understand that, and I understand your market. I live in Silicon Valley. There are a lot of off-road riders and trust fund babies, etc. That's who's going to buy your bike. But if you want to sell it to someone expand your market, you're going to have to get that down to under $2,000 a bike.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people doing that. There's no shortage of low-cost electric bikes on the market.
Jim, what's the range?
I'd like to follow up on his question and get a bit more of an answer. On the safety issue, I understand automobile safety is gradually improving, pedestrian safety is getting worse. What's happening to bicycle safety?
Yeah, I'm not sure overall. It does improve with the infrastructure when they put in dedicated bike paths, and there is a general consensus now that dedicated bike paths are necessary in cities to promote cycling or dedicated roads, which greatly improves the safety. It does seem, this is my personal experience, e-bikes are safer than traditional bikes because your speed is faster, if that makes any sense. But when I drive down the road and can drive at 20 or 30 a lot easier, I'm not getting passed as much, and I feel more part of the transportation mix. But it is still a concern. Bicycling, I don't know, I think it's less dangerous than driving, I don't know, per mile, but it's hard to really get clean facts on that. Is that?
Jim, what do you see as the future of e-bikes in order to capture an elderly population or parent with children, or being able to carry a little bit, cargo, things like that, and not necessarily just your product, but where do you see it go?
That's a good question of where e-bikes. I mean, we build high-performance bikes. We build them in the States. They're expensive because of that. Cargo bikes, traditionally they've looked at baby boomers as the key target for electric bikes. Now they're seeing this shift in younger kids who don't want driver's license, don't want cars. And there's the cargo bikes, which are longer and can fit kids on them and more weight. And with the electrification of them, it makes it a viable transportation. And those are being adopted by the 20-something people now more. So we're seeing a more cross-breeding of society, everybody involved in electric bikes. They really, and even in transport, for like in Europe, FedEx delivers with electric bikes, transport bikes. They stop at cargo type bikes. They stop at the street, load up, and then they drive down the street because it's much faster than in the congested areas.
Yeah, most recreational bike paths are posted no motorized vehicles.
Correct.
This is a motorized vehicle, right?
Well, by federal law, it is an electric bicycle, which is not a motorized vehicle.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the federal law dictates an electric bicycle, when it complies with those laws, shall be allowed everywhere that a bicycle will, but municipalities can restrict them. Boulder has restricted them and now just legalized them on bike paths.
For 1 year.
For 1 year as a test. But they're one of the first places in the nation to do that. There is, mounting pressure, as Boulder is finding, their traffic plan will, I think, when it's a gridlock in 8 years or something, with even their minimal growth build out, they see a grid, and so the bicycle is a vital part of trying to get people out of cars. So.
Mass production will bring the price.
Yeah.
Mass demand is the only thing that will cause that to happen.
Yeah. And again,
I don't know why anybody in this room doesn't see the natural marriage of PRT with this. You get out of the pod car, you seamlessly go to the next mode. You probably already paid for that to handle the last mile. What I mean to say is, if the projects building PRT all over the country and that blossoms, each had a vehicle share, bike share component. Those projects would be ordering fleets at a time, as opposed to one bike at a time.
Yeah. And as I said, China's producing 20 million electric bikes a year. There's no shortage of low-end bikes. The average price in China is like $400 for an electric bike. So the mass production is already in place. The mass adoption in the Western culture is way behind.
Relative to the PRT, I think when we do start to build, we will put bike paths underneath PRT rails, and you'll see it become a lot safer to ride a bicycle.
Yes.
What's the range and rechargeable times of these things?
So ranges by electric bikes vary greatly. There's no standard like the EPA mileage standard, because obviously if you're pedaling an electric bike, you're putting in power. But in general, what's interesting, Bill said the pods, they're like 200 watt hours per mile, electric bikes 20 watt hours, so it's 10 times more efficient than that in energy. These bikes will go anywhere from 25 to 50 miles. They're in the higher end energy capacity of most bikes. They advertise 60-mile range, and again, it depends on your speed and your weight and those things. But most bikes you can do a 20-mile range. Again, this is how much assist do you want.
And how long does it take to recharge?
Some are as low as an hour. Ours take 6 or 8. Our idea is you ride to work, you charge it, you ride home, and you can do 20 to 40 miles. That's probably more than anybody really needs to do in a day.
Is that based on the recharge rate because of the capacity of the battery, or because the charger? Can you change that?
Yeah, you can charge them faster. The chargers get quite large,
Right.
and batteries like to be charged slower to prolong the life. And what we've found is in most personal applications, the fast recharge isn't really an issue.
Right.
In commercial applications, it is.
Right. And then speed. What's the top?
Speeds, you say 20 to 30 miles an hour, somewhere in there. And the average speed is, I can average on some of ours 30 miles an hour over that 10 miles to work. I mean, I ride pretty hard on that, but.
We used Uber to get from our house to LAX airport to come here, and it gives you a breakdown on your average speed and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And our average speed was 16 miles per hour.
Yeah, I think that's the average right at an inner city cars is around 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Even my son the other day drove to Denver and back because my average speed was 30 miles an hour.
Have you thought about theft issues? I know in San Francisco we just have tons and tons of bike theft.
Yes.
Have you heard of that as a reason for not adoption?
Yes. Yeah. Theft is still a concern. It's not going to go away. They're still light. They can be carried away. There's now GPS tracking devices people have that you can put inside them. They're getting more sophisticated because there's electronics in the bike. And one thing I wanted to add is e-bikes kind of shift. If you look at a bicycle, everyone's always striving for maximum efficiency and lightweight because you are doing the pedaling. As we add the motor to the bicycle, we look at not so much minimizing weight, but maximizing comfort and utility. So we might have headlights that are much brighter, theft protection devices that are a little heavier, more rigid frames, you can carry more weight because those become viable. So there's a paradigm shift that goes on, and it's still being adopted even in the bicycling industry of realizing this. And for the consumer to realize that too, that they can suddenly do things they never could do before. We ran a Living Social ad where we said, 4-hour bike rental, bike tour of the mountains, and somebody called, we're in Boulder down on the flats. And they said, well, drive us up there. And I said, you can get the bike and you ride up to Brainerd Lake, which is a 5,000-foot climb. And he said, you can't do that. To the paradigm there of you can't do that, I can't do that, whereas now I can do that.
Jim, are you recapturing on braking?
We do not do regenerative braking. Some of the bikes do that have hub motors. In a bicycle, the kinetic energy is very low. They weigh typically 50 pounds. And bicycles have a lot of frontal mass. As you've noticed, you don't often need the brakes. So it's about a 1 to 2% versus maybe 10 to 15 in a car. Any other questions?
Beautiful bike.
Oh, thanks.
Can I have that?
Yes, take it.
Somebody
Yeah.
ride it home.
We're gonna have one of those strongman contests. Whoever can get it out of the building.
Is there any kind of battery swap thing built into it, like for a quick swap to have spare if you did need that quick recharge?
Yeah, so the majority of electric bikes have a quick change battery in them. We adopt a different philosophy. We have a much larger battery, and it isn't readily swappable for hot swapping. In the Swiss Alps, they have a program where they put batteries at the ends, and it's a really fun thing. You can ride the bike from end to end, and they give you a fresh battery because the inn wants you to come in and eat the meal. And it sounds like one of the greatest things to do. Japan, they have vending machines with the batteries in them. They standardize them. So you just go up to the vending machine, put in whatever, and take a new battery out. And they amortize the costs of the battery wearing out. And that's something I want to talk about batteries too. These batteries get about 30,000 miles in their life minimum. So people often say the battery is a large cost, and even electric cars now, it's millions of miles they're capable of. So I think the auto industry kind of proposed this thing of batteries won't last.
What is the replacement cost then for the battery?
They're anywhere, typically a battery costs about $1 a watt hour, so a kilowatt hour battery is $1,000. And most electric bikes have a 300 watt hour, so they're $300. Ours are a kilowatt hour, so somewhere in that range. A couple, 3 cents a mile.
You know, Budapest has the perfect marriage. They have a electric bike share, but it's powered by the Danube River. There are
Right.
of electric bikes all along the river, and the juice is free.
Yeah, and that's what's great about these. I showed you, you can really buy a solar panel. It's a little hard to do your car, but these are just, really are, and they can do so much. Like I said, FEMA's taking them. You can put hundreds of pounds of weight on them. We're in the process of building a trike for delivery where you can carry 300 pounds on it, because commercial vehicles are very expensive. It's 55 cents a mile. A lot of them are paying 90 cents a mile when you really look at a truck and everything, added insurance over a personal vehicle. Am I done?
Thank you very much.
Thanks.